The interrogation chamber, the cold metal floor beneath Captain Nexver's feet, felt like ice against his scaled skin. 6 months had passed since the failed invasion of Earth, and now he sat in the interrogation chamber of the Corthany flagship. Star Render, facing 5 of the most powerful military leaders in the galaxy. The room was designed to intimidate, with its stark white walls and blinding lights that cast harsh shadows across the faces of those who dared to question the might of the Corthany Empire. General Zixithan, the fleet commander who had ordered the invasion, sat directly across from Nexver. His crimson eyes burned with barely contained fury, and his powerful claws drummed impatiently on the metal table. The other 4 commanders sat in silence, their expressions ranging from confusion to outright disgust. They had all read the reports, but none of them truly understood how 3 million Corthany warriors had been defeated by a single human colony world. Captain Nexver, General Zixithan began, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 different worlds. You were the ground operations commander for the Earth invasion. You personally led the assault on what these humans call North America. Explain to this tribunal how the most advanced military force in the galaxy was defeated by primitive creatures who had barely achieved spaceflight. Nexver's throat felt dry. He had rehearsed this moment countless times during the long journey back to Corthany space, but now, faced with the reality of explaining the impossible, words seemed inadequate. How could he make them understand what humans truly were when pushed to the brink of extinction? Generals, Nexver began, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at his chest. Our intelligence reports were completely wrong. Everything we thought we knew about human nature was based on incomplete data. We studied their military conflicts, their government structures, their technological capabilities. But we never studied what they become when faced with total annihilation. Commander Vextal, the intelligence officer who had prepared the invasion briefings, leaned forward aggressively. Our data came from observation of 17 different human conflicts over the past 50 years. We analyzed their military tactics, their weapons technology, their psychological profiles. How could our analysis be so fundamentally flawed? Vexver met the commander's gaze without flinching. Because in all those conflicts, humans were fighting each other. They were following rules, trying to preserve their civilization, attempting to minimize casualties. When we invaded Earth, we didn't just attack their military forces. We threatened their entire species with extinction. We showed them a future where humanity would cease to exist. The captain stood and began pacing, his memories carrying him back to those terrifying days on Earth's surface. The orbital bombardment proceeded exactly as planned. We targeted their major cities first, then their military installations. Standard invasion protocol that had worked on every other world we had conquered. Most species surrender at this point, or at least attempt to negotiate. And the humans? Asked General Zixithan. The humans did something we had never encountered before. Instead of surrendering or fleeing, they adapted. Within hours of our bombardment, they had transformed their entire society into a military organization. Not just their soldiers, but every single human on the planet became part of their resistance. Nexver paused, remembering the first human transmission they had intercepted. It had come from a human named Dr. Elena Martinez, who their intelligence had identified as an agricultural scientist. She had been working at something called the New Geneva Research Facility when the bombardment began. There was a human female who changed everything, Nexver continued. Our computers identified her as Dr. Elena Martinez, an agricultural researcher. According to our intelligence, she studied plant biology and had no military training whatsoever. Do you know what she did when her research facility was destroyed? The commanders waited in silence. She didn't mourn the loss of her life's work. She didn't try to evacuate to safety. Instead, She immediately began analyzing the chemical composition of our bombardment weapons. Within 6 hours, she had developed a biological agent that could neutralize our standard explosive compounds. She turned her knowledge of plant chemistry into a weapon system. Commander Vextal scoffed. A single scientist cannot pose a threat to a planetary invasion force. Vexver's laugh was bitter. That's what we thought. But Dr. Martinez didn't work alone. She used their communication networks to share her discoveries with every human on the planet. Agricultural researchers, industrial chemists, university professors, even high school teachers. They all began developing countermeasures to our weapons using nothing but their existing knowledge and improvised materials. The captain returned to his seat, his expression growing more intense. By the third day of the invasion, we began encountering completely unexpected resistance. Our energy weapons, which should have been devastating to human forces, were being neutralized by compounds they had created in their laboratories. Explosives that should have leveled their buildings were being diffused by devices they had built from farming equipment. General Zixithan leaned back in his chair, his expression troubled. "Continue your report, Captain. Tell us about the ground assault." Dexfer closed his eyes, letting his mind drift back to the moment when everything changed. The primary landing. Site was designated Target Alpha 7, a human settlement they called Denver. Population approximately 700,000 humans. Our force numbered 150,000 warriors with full battle armor and air support. By every military calculation, the battle should have lasted less than 12 hours. But it didn't, observed Commander Jackmer, the tactical specialist. No, sir. It lasted 3 weeks, and we lost. The room fell silent, except for the hum of the ship's engines. The concept of a Korthani military force losing a battle was almost incomprehensible to the assembled commanders. Dexfer continued, his voice growing stronger as he relived the memories. We expected to find human military forces waiting behind defensive barriers. Instead, we found something far more dangerous. The humans had evacuated their cities, but they hadn't fled. They had spread out across the landscape like water finding cracks in stone, and they had turned their entire environment into a weapon. What do you mean? Asked General Zixithan. They had used their knowledge of their own planet against us. Agricultural scientists had modified their farming equipment into weapons. Industrial engineers had converted their factories into ammunition production facilities. Urban planners had redesigned their cities into elaborate death traps. Even there, medical doctors had developed biological weapons specifically designed to target Korthani physiology. X4 stood again, unable to remain still as the images flooded back. But the most terrifying thing wasn't their weapons or their tactics. It was their unity. In every other species we had conquered, there were always factions that would surrender or collaborate in exchange for survival. The humans had no such factions. Every single human we encountered was willing to die rather than submit to conquest. That's impossible, protested Commander Vextal. No species is that unified. The humans are, when their survival is at stake. We captured several of their communication networks and intercepted thousands of their messages. There was no panic, no despair, no calls for surrender. Instead, we found detailed tactical discussions, resource-sharing agreements, and scientific collaboration on a scale we had never imagined possible. The captain walked to the chamber's single window, looking out at the stars. There was one message that haunts me still. It came from a human named Marcus Chun, who had been an engineer before the invasion. His entire family had been killed in the orbital bombardment, his home destroyed, his life's work erased. Do you know what his message said? The commanders waited. He had calculated the exact chemical composition of our ship hull materials based on debris from the bombardment. He shared this information with every human on the planet, along with instructions for creating acid compounds that could dissolve our armor. He ended his message with a simple statement. They killed my family, but they gave us the tools to kill them back. Asterisk. Dexver turned back to face the tribunal. That's when I began to understand what we were really fighting. These weren't just defenders of their homeland. They were a species that had been pushed to the absolute edge of extinction, and they had chosen to fight back with every resource at their disposal. Tell us about their underground networks, General Zixathan commanded. The tunnels were the key to their success. While we were focusing on controlling the surface, the humans had created an entire civilization underground. They had connected their subway systems, their utility tunnels, their building foundations, even their natural cave systems into a vast network that spanned entire continents. Dexver's voice grew more animated as he continued. They could move troops and supplies across thousands of kilometers without ever appearing on our surface sensors. They had communication lines, supply depots, weapons manufacturing facilities, even medical centers, all hidden beneath our feet. We controlled the surface of their planet, but they controlled everything underneath. How did they coordinate such a massive undertaking? Asked Commander Jackmer. Through their scientists and engineers. Dr. Martinez had become the unofficial leader of their resistance, but she wasn't giving orders in the traditional military sense. Instead, she was sharing information and letting each human community adapt her strategies to their local conditions. They had created a command structure based on knowledge sharing rather than hierarchical control. The captain's expression grew darker. But the most disturbing thing was how quickly they learned to fight us. Every engagement taught them something new about our weaknesses. They would capture our equipment, reverse engineer our technology, and then use it against us in ways we had never anticipated. Give us a specific example, demanded General Zixathan. On the 7th day, we encountered a human named Sarah Williams. Our intelligence identified her as a medical technician, someone who treated injured humans in their healthcare facilities. She had no military training, no weapons expertise, no combat experience. But she had something far more dangerous. Which was, she had captured one of our communication devices and figured out how to use it, not just to listen to our transmissions, but to send false orders to our troops. She spent 3 days impersonating our command structure, redirecting our patrols into ambushes, ordering our supply convoys to deliver materials directly to human forces, even convincing some of our units to attack each other. The chamber fell, silent as the implications sank in. A human medical technician had single-handedly disrupted their entire command structure. Dexver continued, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. When we finally tracked her down, she was in an abandoned hospital, surrounded by wounded humans she was treating. She had every opportunity to flee, but she stayed to care for her people. When our forces surrounded the building, she activated the hospital's medical equipment in a way that created a massive electromagnetic pulse. It destroyed every piece of electronic equipment within a kilometer radius, including our powered armor and weapon systems. And then she walked out of the building and surrendered herself to protect the wounded humans inside. But even in surrender, she had accomplished her mission. Our forces in that sector were completely blind and defenseless for 18 hours. By the time we restored our equipment, the humans had evacuated everyone from the hospital and disappeared, back into their tunnel networks. General Zixathan's expression had changed from anger to something approaching respect. What happened to this Sarah Williams? She died in our custody 3 days later, but not from anything we did to her. She had been exposed to massive radiation during the electromagnetic pulse. She knew it would kill her, but she did it anyway. To save her people. The captain returned to his chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. That's when I realized we weren't just fighting a military force. We were fighting an entire species that had chosen death over surrender. Every human we encountered was willing to sacrifice their life if it meant saving others or dealing damage to our forces. But surely you had some tactical advantages, protested Commander Vextel. Your superior numbers, your advanced technology, your military training. None of it mattered. The humans had something we didn't understand and couldn't counter. They had absolute unity of purpose combined with incredible individual creativity. They could adapt to any situation, learn from any failure, and turn any setback into an opportunity for counterattack. Dexfer looked at each of the tribunal members in turn. Generals, we didn't just lose a battle on Earth. We encountered a species that represents everything we thought was impossible. They have no central authority, yet they act with perfect coordination. They have no military tradition, yet they fight with incredible effectiveness. They have limited resources, yet they create weapons we cannot defend against. And your final assessment, Captain? Asked General Zixithan. The humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, not because of their technology or their military might, but because of their refusal to give up. They will fight with anything they can find, adapt to any situation, and never, ever surrender. We may have superior firepower, but they have something far more powerful, the absolute determination to survive. The interrogation chamber fell, silent as the weight of Vexfar's words settled over the assembled commanders. Outside the reinforced windows, stars wheeled slowly through the darkness, and somewhere among them, Earth continued to spin, its human inhabitants already preparing for the next invasion they knew would come. The debriefing was far from over, but already the Korthani military leadership was beginning to understand that their encounter with humanity had changed everything they thought they knew about warfare, survival, and the true meaning of strength. Asterisk. Final Stand General Zixithan leaned forward, his crimson eyes fixed on Captain Nexfer. Your report mentions a final assault on something called the New Geneva Research Facility. Our records show this was where the human resistance leadership was coordinating their activities. Tell us about this battle. Nexfer's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the arms of his chair. The memories of that final day still haunted his dreams, filled with images that challenged everything he had believed about warfare and victory. The New Geneva facility became our primary target after 3 weeks of failed attempts to break the human resistance. Our intelligence indicated that Dr. Elena Martinez was coordinating global resistance efforts from that location. A logical target, observed Commander Jackmer. Eliminate the leadership, and the resistance collapses. That's what we believed, Exar replied, his voice heavy with the weight of painful memory. Command ordered me to take our remaining forces, approximately 80,000 warriors, and capture or destroy the facility. It should have been a simple operation. The building was only a few square kilometers, housing maybe 200 humans at most. The captain stood and walked to the chamber's window, watching the stars drift by as he gathered his thoughts. We began our approach at dawn on the 22nd day of the invasion. Full air support, heavy artillery, our most advanced battlesuits. The facility sat in a valley surrounded by agricultural land, what the humans called farmland. Perfect terrain for our assault vehicles. What was your first indication that something was wrong? Asked General Zixithan. The silence, Exver answered immediately. In every previous engagement, we had encountered immediate resistance. Energy weapons fire, explosions, some kind of defensive response. But as we approached the New Geneva facility, we detected nothing. No energy signatures, no movement, no communications traffic. It was as if the place was completely abandoned. Commander Vextel frowned. Perhaps the humans had finally realized the futility of resistance and evacuated. Dexver's laugh was bitter and harsh. That's what we hoped. We had learned enough about human nature to know they never simply gave. But we thought perhaps their leadership had finally accepted reality. Our advanced scouts reported that the main research building appeared empty, with no signs of recent occupation. But they were wrong, General Zixathan stated rather than asked. Completely wrong. The humans hadn't evacuated. They had evolved. Captain turned back to face the tribunal, his expression grave. As our main force approached the facility, we began to notice changes in the surrounding landscape. The agricultural fields that should have been destroyed by our previous bombardments were not only intact, but thriving. Plants grew in perfect geometric patterns that seemed almost ... artificial. Agricultural modifications? Asked Commander Jackmer. That was our first assumption. But as we got closer, our sensors began detecting unusual chemical signatures in the air. Sweet, almost floral scents that seemed to shift and change as we moved through the area. Our atmospheric analysis equipment couldn't identify the compounds, but our medical scanners began registering elevated stress responses in our troops. Dexver began pacing again, his claws clicking against the metal floor. The first casualties occurred when Lieutenant Verthal's squad investigated what appeared to be a normal grain storage facility. They entered the building following standard clearing procedures, but within minutes, their biosignatures began showing signs of severe physiological distress. Poison gas? Suggested Commander Vextol. Not gas. The humans had somehow modified the plants themselves to produce airborne compounds that specifically targeted Corthony respiratory systems. Dr. Martinez had weaponized agriculture itself. But that was just the beginning. The captain's voice grew more intense as he continued. As we advanced through the farmland, we discovered that every single plant had been genetically modified for warfare. Some produced toxic spores when disturbed. Others released chemicals that corroded our armor. The most insidious ones emitted pheromones that disrupted our communication equipment. Surely your environmental suits provided protection, observed General Zixathan. They did, initially. But the humans had anticipated this. They had studied our equipment captured from earlier battles and developed compounds that could break down the sealing materials in our suits. Within hours of exposure, our environmental protection began failing systematically. Dexver stopped pacing and faced the tribunal directly. But the modified plants were just the outer defense. As we finally reached the research facility itself, we discovered what Dr. Martinez had really been building. The entire complex had been transformed into something that challenged our understanding of military architecture. Explain, commanded General Zixathan. The humans had turned their research facility into a living fortress. The walls were covered with modified plants that could detect our approach and respond accordingly. The building itself had become a biological organism designed specifically to fight us. The captain's voice dropped to almost a whisper. The outer walls were covered with vines that could move and react to our presence. When we fired our energy weapons at them, they absorbed the energy and redirected it back at us. When we attempted to breach the walls with explosives, the plants released chemicals that neutralized our charges. And inside the facility? Asked Commander Jackmer. Inside was where we met Dr. Martinez face to face. She was waiting for us in what had been the main laboratory, surrounded by equipment that our scientists still cannot fully understand. She looked exactly like our intelligence reports had described. A middle-aged human female, average height, wearing the simple clothing of a researcher. But her eyes... Dexver paused, struggling to find the right words. Her eyes held the accumulated pain of her entire species. She had watched our bombardment destroy everything she had worked to protect. She had seen her people die, her civilization threatened with extinction. But instead of despair, she had channeled that pain into something far more dangerous. absolute determination. "What did she say to you?" General Zixathan asked. "She welcomed us." In perfect Corthany, she said, "Welcome to Earth, Captain Thexver. I've been waiting to meet you." She knew my name, my rank, my personal history. She had studied our command structure and identified me as the tactical leader of the ground forces. The captain's expression grew haunted. Then she began to explain what she had built. The new Geneva facility wasn't just a research center anymore. It was a biological weapons laboratory designed specifically to counter every aspect of Corthany military capability. She had created targeted diseases that could affect only our species, chemical compounds that could dissolve our armor, and biological agents that could disrupt our technology. How could one human scientist accomplish such a feat? Protested Commander Vextol, because she wasn't working alone. The human communication networks had connected her with every biologist, chemist, and engineer on their planet. They had shared their knowledge, their resources, and their expertise to create weapons that no single individual could have developed. Thexver returned to his chair, his movements careful and deliberate. Dr. Martinez showed us samples of what they had created. Microscopic organisms that could eat through our ship hulls. Airborne pathogens that could incapacitate our troops without affecting humans. Chemical compounds that could turn our own technology against us. But you had superior numbers, General Zixathan pointed out. Surely you could have overwhelmed her defenses. We tried. For 6 hours, we threw everything we had at that facility. Energy weapons, explosives, chemical attacks, even direct assault by our most experienced warriors. Nothing worked. Every attack was countered by some new biological defense that we had never encountered before. The captain's voice became hollow. But the worst part wasn't the weapons or the defenses. It was the realization that Dr. Martinez had no intention of using most of what she had created. She was showing us her capabilities not as a threat, but as a demonstration. A demonstration of what? Of what humans could become if we pushed them too far. She explained that everything we had seen was just the beginning. The biological weapons she had developed could be mass-produced and deployed globally within days. The genetic modifications could be spread to every plant and animal on their planet. The chemical compounds could be launched into space to destroy our entire fleet. Thexver looked at each tribunal member in turn. But she offered us a choice. She would demonstrate the full power of human scientific capability, or we could withdraw from Earth and never return. She gave us 1 hour to decide. "And your decision?" asked General Zixathan. "I chose the demonstration. I had to see what humans were truly capable of when pushed to the absolute limit of survival." The chamber fell silent, except for the hum of the ship's engines. The assembled commanders waited for Thexver to continue, their expressions ranging from curiosity to dread. Dr. Martinez nodded when I gave her my answer, as if she had expected it. Then she activated something she called the Genesis Protocol. Within minutes, the entire valley around the research facility began to change. Thexver's voice grew stronger as he continued. The modified plants began to grow at an impossible rate. Trees that should have taken years to mature reached full size in minutes. Vines spread across the landscape like a green flood, covering our vehicles and equipment. The air filled with spores and chemicals that our sensors couldn't analyze. What effect did this have on your forces? Complete system failure. Our weapons stopped working. Our communication equipment went silent. Our armor began to dissolve. Within 30 minutes, 80,000 of the galaxy's most advanced warriors were reduced to helpless observers as the humans reshaped their world around us. The captain stood again, his movements agitated. But Dr. Martinez wasn't finished. She activated the second phase of her demonstration. The plants began to move with purpose and intelligence. They surrounded our forces, not to attack, but to deliver a message. What message? Each plant formation spelled out words in Korthani script. The message was simple, but terrifying. This is what mercy looks like. Next time, we won't be so generous. Vexver's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Then she deactivated the Genesis protocol. The plants stopped growing, our equipment began working again, and our weapons came back online. But the demonstration had achieved its purpose. We understood that the humans could have killed us all at any moment, but they had chosen not to. And then, Dr. Martinez walked out of the facility, approached our position alone and unarmed, and repeated her offer. We could withdraw from Earth and never return, or she would activate the Genesis protocol permanently and spread it across their entire planet. The choice was ours. General Zixathan leaned back in his chair, his expression troubled. What was your assessment of her capabilities? Absolutely genuine. The humans had developed biological weapons that could reshape their entire world into a weapon system designed specifically to counter our technology. They could have deployed these weapons at any time during the invasion, but they had chosen to wait until the last moment, hoping we would withdraw voluntarily. Why didn't they use these weapons earlier? Vexver's laugh was bitter. Because they didn't want to destroy their own world. The Genesis protocol would have turned Earth into a biological weapons laboratory, capable of destroying any invasion force. But it would also have made large portions of their planet uninhabitable for their own species. They were willing to sacrifice their world only as a last resort. The captain walked back to the window, looking out at the stars. I gave the order to withdraw, not because I was afraid for our forces, but because I finally understood what we were really fighting. The humans weren't just defending their planet. They were demonstrating that they had become something new, something that could adapt to any threat and overcome any challenge. And Dr. Martinez's final words to you? Asked General Zixathan. She thanked me for making the right choice. Then she said something that still haunts me. Captain, your people are strong and brave, but you fight for conquest. We fight for survival. That's a battle you can never win, because we will never stop adapting, never stop learning, and never stop growing stronger. Vexver turned back to face the tribunal. As we withdrew from Earth's surface, I watched the human settlements begin to rebuild, not just repairing the damage from our bombardment, but improving on what had been destroyed. They were already incorporating the lessons learned from our invasion into their new construction, making their civilization stronger and more resilient than before. Your final assessment, Captain? The humans are not just another species to be conquered. They are a force of nature that grows stronger with every challenge they face. Our invasion didn't weaken them. It taught them how to fight galactic-level threats and win. Vexver sat down slowly, his report finally complete. Generals, I recommend that we declare Earth off-limits to all Korthani forces. Not because we cannot conquer it, but because any attempt to do so will result in the humans developing capabilities that could threaten our entire civilization. The interrogation chamber fell silent as the assembled commanders absorbed the full implications of Vexver's report. Outside the reinforced windows, the stars continued their eternal dance through the void, and somewhere among them, Earth spun quietly through space, its human inhabitants already preparing for whatever challenges the galaxy might bring. The Korthani Empire had encountered humanity and discovered that some battles, no matter how overwhelming the odds, simply cannot be won through superior firepower alone. They had learned that the most dangerous enemy is not the one with the biggest weapons, but the one who refuses to give up, adapts to every challenge, and grows stronger with every defeat. Earth had taught them that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their military might, but their absolute refusal to accept extinction. And that lesson would echo through the corridors of Korthani Command for generations to come. a reminder that in the vast darkness of space, there were some species that simply could not be conquered, no matter how advanced the invading force. Might be, the age of easy conquest was over. Humanity had seen to that.